I never expected a simple evening walk in the park to destroy everything I thought I knew about life and death. It started with a child. She was sitting on a cold wooden bench, her tiny frame shaking as the wind cut through the trees. Her knees were pulled tight to her chest, and tears streamed down her dirt-streaked cheeks. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. I slowed my steps, my heart tightening at the sight of her. Children weren't supposed to look that broken. She looked up at me with wide, frightened eyes, and her voice cracked as she whispered, "I can't find my mom." Something inside me shifted. I knew pain. I knew what it was to lose someone who should never have been gone. In that moment, I couldn't walk past her. I knelt down and told her, "Don't worry, I'll take you home." Her small hand slipped into mine, trembling but trusting, and I felt the weight of her fear press against me. I thought I was saving her. I thought I was doing the right thing, but when I carried her back to the house she called her own and the door swung open, my entire body froze. Standing in the doorway was my wife, Honora, the woman I had buried a year ago. Her eyes locked onto mine, alive and steady, and she spoke 4 words that ripped my world apart. "You shouldn't be here." My name is Evan Hale. For most of my life, I believed I understood what it meant to carry responsibility. I was a husband, a father, and a son. I worked steady hours at a local carpentry shop, came home tired but grateful, and ended each night with my wife, Honora, beside me and my son, Callan, asleep down the hall. My world was simple, not perfect, but built on love. That illusion of stability ended in an instant the day Honora died. It has been over a year since I buried her. A drunk driver took her life during what should have been a routine drive to pick up Callan from a friend's birthday party. I arrived at the hospital too late, and by the time I saw her face one last time, her skin had already grown cold. The memory of holding her hand that night is carved into me like a scar that refuses to heal. Since then, every day has been a balancing act between surviving for my son and drowning in the grief that lives just under my skin. Callan is 10 now, though some days he feels far older. He does not cry often, but I catch him staring at photographs of his mother when he thinks I am not looking. His favorite picture is the one where Honora is holding him as a toddler, her arms wrapped tight around him, her smile wide and full of light. I hear him whisper to that photograph when he believes he is alone. He asks her questions she cannot answer. He asks why she left and why God took her. As his father, I want to give him answers, but the truth is that I have none. My father, Rowan, tries to keep us steady. He lives nearby and visits almost every day, sometimes to drop off food, sometimes to sit with Callan while I work. Rowan is a man of blunt words and stubborn faith. He tells me constantly that I have to move on, that my boy needs a father who is present, not one haunted by ghosts. "You cannot live in the grave with her, Evan," he told me one night when I sat alone on the porch long after midnight. "Your son needs you among the living." His voice was firm, but there was sorrow in his eyes. He had lost my mother years ago and knows the taste of that particular grief. Still, his way of handling it is to push forward, to bury pain under discipline and routine. I have never been able to do that. I am not proud of the man I have become since Honora's death. I function, but I am not whole. I get Callan ready for school. I put food on the table. I try to smile when he tells me about his day, but inside my chest feels hollow. Nights are the worst. The bed is cold, the silence unbearable. I still expect to hear her soft footsteps in the hallway, still expect to see her handwriting on notes left in the kitchen. When those illusions break, the emptiness comes rushing back with twice the force. To cope, I started walking in the park every evening after work. It is not far from our home, a stretch of quiet paths lined with oak and maple trees. The playground is usually filled with children's laughter during the day, but as dusk settles, the noise fades and the park grows quiet. The air smells of damp earth, and the wind carries the faint rustle of leaves. For me, it became a place where I could breathe without breaking. I would walk, think, and sometimes sit on the benches staring at the horizon until the streetlights flickered on. Callan often asked why I walked alone. I told him I needed the fresh air. In truth, I was chasing memories. Honora and I had walked that same park together years ago, hand in hand, dreaming of our future, watching Callan toddle ahead of us. Being there hurt, but it also kept me tethered to her. It was as if some part of her still lingered between those trees, and I was desperate to feel even a shadow of her presence. Rowan disapproved. He said the park only dragged me deeper into grief. "You have to stop living in the past," he repeated, his voice sharp with frustration. But he did not understand that the past was the only place where I could still see her. On the night everything changed, I remember leaving the house with a heaviness in my chest. Callan had fallen asleep early, clutching his mother's old scarf like a lifeline. I pulled the blanket over him, whispered good night, and stepped outside into the cool air. The streets were quiet, the lamps casting long shadows across the pavement. I walked to the park like I had done countless times before, expecting nothing more than silence and the steady rhythm of my own footsteps. I had no idea that night would not end like the others. I did not know that waiting for me in the shadows of that park was a little girl whose presence would shatter everything I thought I knew about grief, love, and the finality of death. The park was quiet that evening. A cool wind cut across the open field, carrying the smell of damp leaves and freshly cut grass. The swings at the playground swayed gently, even though no one was there to push them. I walked the path I always took, hands shoved into my jacket pockets, head down, mind drifting toward thoughts of Honora. It was a routine, and in its repetition I found something that almost felt like comfort. That was when I heard it. At first it was so faint I thought I had imagined it, a broken sound carried on the wind. I stopped and listened. The faint cry came again, high and trembling. A child's cry. My body stiffened as my eyes scanned the path ahead. The sound grew clearer, desperate and small, and I followed it past the swings and toward a wooden bench near the pond. There she was. A little girl sat curled against the arm of the bench, her arms wrapped tight around her legs. Her shoulders shook as she sobbed into her knees. Her clothes looked thin for the chill of the evening, a pale dress that clung to her frame, and her shoes were scuffed and damp. Her face lifted when she sensed me near, and I saw her wide eyes glisten in the dim light. My chest tightened. She looked so small and fragile, and the way her body trembled struck something deep in me. It reminded me of Callan when he was younger, the nights he would climb into our bed after a nightmare, clutching at me or Honora for safety. I could not ignore this child. I walked slowly toward her, raising my hands to show I meant no harm. "Hey," I said gently, my voice calm but carrying in the still air. "It's all right. Are you hurt?" The girl shook her head but said nothing. Her lips quivered, and she wiped at her eyes with the back of her sleeve. "What's your name?" I asked. "Mira," she whispered, so softly I almost missed it. "That's a beautiful name," I told her. "Mira, why are you out here all alone?" Her breath hitched as she answered. "I can't find my mommy." The words stabbed through me. No child should be wandering a park at night alone, lost and frightened. I crouched down so I was eye level with her. "Where did you last see her?" She pointed vaguely toward the street beyond the trees. She told me to wait, but she didn't come back. I waited and waited. Her voice broke and tears welled again. I felt my throat tighten. "You must be cold," I said. "Come on, I'll help you get home." Mira hesitated, looking at me with those tear-filled eyes, as if trying to decide whether I was safe. Finally, she reached out her small hand. It was ice cold when it slipped into mine. My heart ached as I gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "I promise I'll get you to your mom," I said firmly. "You're not alone anymore." She nodded, trusting me in the way only a child can. We walked together down the winding paths of the park, her hand never leaving mine. She stayed close, her steps quick and nervous. I asked her questions to keep her calm. "How old are you, Mira?" "7, she answered, her voice steadier now. "And where do you live?" She pointed again toward the rows of houses just beyond the trees. "Over there, I know the way I let her guide me." The houses were familiar, small homes with porches and dimly lit windows. I thought I knew the neighborhood, but something in the pit of my stomach tightened as we walked further. The streets grew quieter, emptier, until Mira slowed and finally tugged on my hand. "This one," she said, pointing at a house with pale blue siding and a porch light glowing above the door. I froze. I knew that house. My pulse quickened as I studied the windows, the front steps, the porch rail that curved slightly where the paint had chipped. It was a house that had once held every dream I ever had. My throat went dry. This was my house. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. Mira looked up at me expectantly, her face filled with hope. "Mommy's inside," she said with quiet certainty. My mind reeled. I knew this was impossible. That house had been empty since Honora died. After the funeral, I could not bear to stay there, so Callan and I moved into a smaller place, closer to my father. The old house had stood silent, untouched. Yet here I was, holding the hand of a girl who claimed it as her home. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong. My grip on Mira's hand tightened. I could turn around now. I could take her to the police station, let them handle it, and never know what waited behind that door. But her eyes pleaded with me, filled with trust. I had promised her I would bring her home. The porch steps creaked under our weight as we climbed them. My legs felt heavy, my chest tight with dread. Mira tugged on my hand, eager now, her voice urgent. "Please, she's in there. Please knock." I raised my fist to the door. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. I hesitated, frozen in place, torn between fear and duty. My promise to Mira echoed in my head, pushing me forward. Finally, I let my knuckles rap against the wood. The sound was sharp, final, and in the silence that followed I felt the world hold its breath. The doorknob turned. The sound of the latch turning sent a chill down my spine. Every nerve in my body told me to run, to take Mira and leave before the door opened, but my feet would not move. I stood rooted to the porch, my hand still clutching hers. Her grip was firm now, not fearful like before, but eager, almost pulling me forward as if she could already see her mother waiting on the other side. The door creaked open an inch, spilling warm light into the night. My throat tightened. I had walked this porch hundreds of times when it had been my home. I had opened this very door with groceries in my arms, with Callan bouncing at my side, with Honora smiling and welcoming us inside. Now, after a year of abandonment, I expected emptiness. But light meant someone was there. Someone was living in a place I had left to die. The gap widened, and I saw the outline of a figure inside. My heart pounded so violently I thought it might shatter my ribs. I wanted to turn, to pull Mira away, but her small voice cut through the storm in my head. "Mommy," she whispered. I froze. That word dug deep, twisting inside me. The figure stepped into view. For a moment I thought my mind had broken completely. It was her. Honora. My wife. The woman I had lowered into the ground 1 year ago stood alive in the doorway, her eyes sharp and steady, her hair falling exactly as I remembered, her features untouched by time or death. My knees weakened. I had imagined her face so many nights that at first I thought this was another cruel vision. But Mira released my hand and rushed into her arms, colliding against her with a cry of joy. The sound was real. The embrace was real. I could not deny what I saw. Honora was here. She was alive. The world tilted around me. My breathing grew ragged. I wanted to speak, to shout her name, to demand an explanation, but no sound came. My mind flooded with memories of the funeral, of the coffin, of the dirt falling onto wood. I had seen her body. I had touched her cold skin. How could she be here? Honora's eyes met mine over the top of Mira's head. The warmth in her gaze that had once soothed me was gone. In its place was something distant, guarded. She pressed Mira close and whispered something in her ear before gently setting her down. Mira clung to her dress, looking back at me with confusion. Then Honora stepped forward. She stood just inside the threshold, her hand resting on the doorframe. Her voice was calm, steady, but every syllable cut deep. "You shouldn't be here." The words hit me harder than any blow. Not, "How are you alive?" Not, "I've missed you." Not even my name, just a warning, a dismissal. My hands shook uncontrollably. "What do you mean?" I finally forced out, my voice hoarse. "Honora, is it really you?" Her eyes did not soften. "Take your son and leave this place behind, Evan. This isn't your home anymore." I staggered back, confusion and anger mixing with the ache in my chest. "Leave it behind? I buried you. I mourned you every single day. And now you're standing here with a child calling you mother. What am I supposed to believe?" Mira looked between us, her small face tight with fear, her grip on Honora's dress tightening. Honora lowered her gaze to the girl, brushing her hair back gently, before returning her eyes to me. "You promised her you would bring her home. You kept that promise. That's all you need to do." Her words were final, sharp, like a door slamming shut. But I could not walk away. "Callan still cries for you," I said, my voice breaking. "He talks to your pictures. He asks where you are. You are his mother. How can you stand there and tell me this isn't our home?" For the first time, something flickered in her expression, a flash of pain quickly hidden. She pressed a hand against the frame as if steadying herself. "I cannot explain tonight. And if you love our son, you will not bring him here." Every muscle in my body trembled. I wanted to push past her, to storm into the house and demand answers, but the weight of her gaze held me in place. It was the same strength that had always stopped me from making reckless choices, the same calm that had balanced my fire, except now it was turned against me. Mira tugged at her hand, whispering, "Mommy, who is he?" Honora knelt down, pressing her forehead to her daughter's. "No one you need to fear," she said softly. Then she stood again, facing me, her expression unreadable. I opened my mouth to speak, but the door began to close. Slowly, deliberately, she shut me out, the light fading until only the porch bulb glowed overhead. The final click of the lock echoed through the night, leaving me standing there in silence. My hands hung limp at my sides. My legs felt heavy as stone. Part of me wanted to collapse on the porch and scream until the neighbors came running. Another part of me wanted to tear the door down. But I did neither. I stumbled down the steps, my breath uneven, my heart still racing. I had promised Mira I would bring her home, and I had. But what waited at her home was something I could not comprehend. Honora was alive. She had a child who called her mother. And she had told me, with eyes I could not forget, that I should not be there. That night I walked away from the house that had once been mine, my mind unraveling with every step. I did not know if I was more broken by the fact that Honora lived, or by the fact that she no longer wanted me in her life. I walked away from the porch in a haze, my steps uneven as if the ground itself no longer held me. The world felt unreal. Every streetlight glared too bright, every shadow seemed to breathe, and the sound of my own heartbeat drowned out the quiet neighborhood. Honora was alive. I had seen her with my own eyes. I had touched her hand when we married, held her in grief when she died, and now I had watched her embrace a child who called her mother. Nothing in my life had prepared me for this. I stopped halfway down the street, staring back at the house. The glow of the porch light still cut across the steps where I had stood moments earlier. Behind that door was the woman I had loved more than my own life. She had told me I did not belong there, but the need for answers burned hotter than my fear. I could not simply leave. Not now. I turned back, each step heavy but deliberate. My fists clenched at my sides. I would not leave until I understood. When I reached the porch again, I pressed my hand flat against the wood of the door. It was warm under my palm, the heat from inside seeping through. My chest rose and fell with sharp breaths. Then, before doubt could stop me, I knocked again. The silence stretched long enough that I thought she might ignore me. Then the door opened once more, this time only slightly. Honora stood in the gap, her expression tight, her voice a whisper sharp as steel. "Evan, you should have left." I swallowed hard. "No, not until you tell me what is happening. You owe me that much. I buried you. I broke under the weight of losing you. Callan cries for you every night, and here you are, alive. Tell me the truth." Her jaw clenched. Behind her, I saw Mira standing in the hallway, her small hand gripping the edge of the wall, peeking out with wide eyes. The sight of the girl twisted my insides. If Mira was her daughter, that meant Honora had built a new life in secret. But how could that be when I had seen her laid to rest? Honora stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind her so Mira could not hear. The air between us grew thick with tension. She crossed her arms, her eyes glistening though her voice stayed firm. "You are not supposed to be here, Evan. My life ended the day of that crash. What you buried was real, but it was not the whole truth. I was given a chance to start again, away from the world we knew. You were never meant to see this." Her words sent a shiver through me. Given a chance? By who? What does that even mean? She looked away, down the street as if afraid someone might be listening. I cannot explain everything. All I can tell you is that Mira is my daughter now, my responsibility. My life is here, and yours is with Callan. If you bring him into this, if you try to pull me back, it will destroy everything. Tears stung my eyes. Destroy what? A lie? Do you know what it has been like for me, for our son, to live without you? To believe you were gone? And now you tell me you chose this? You chose to leave us? Her composure cracked for the first time. Her lips trembled, her hands shook as she lowered them to her sides. You think it was easy for me? To watch from a distance? To hear Callan's cries in my heart and not hold him? I died that night, Evan. What you see here is something different. I am not the wife you lost. I am not the mother he remembers. I cannot be her again. The words hollowed me out. She was standing right in front of me, alive, her breath visible in the night air, her voice trembling with emotion. Yet she claimed she was no longer mine, no longer his. The love of my life was a ghost wearing her face, flesh and blood, yet unreachable. I stepped closer, my voice breaking. Then tell me this, Honora. Look me in the eye and tell me you do not love us any more. Tell me you do not love your son. Her tears finally fell. She shook her head, unable to speak at first, then whispered, "I love him more than anything. That is why I cannot come back. He needs a father who is present, not a mother tied to a world that no longer belongs to her." The truth crushed me. She was alive, but she was lost, to us all the same. Mira opened the door then, her small voice carrying out into the night. "Mommy, please come inside." Honora wiped her face quickly and turned toward me one last time. "Go home, Evan. Tell Callan I love him. That will have to be enough." She stepped back into the house, the door closed firmly, the lock sliding into place. I stood alone on the porch, my fists trembling, my breath ragged, my heart torn in ways I had not thought possible. I walked away slowly this time, each step heavier than the last. The night seemed colder, the street longer, and the weight of her words pressed against me until I thought it might crush me. My wife was alive. She had told me she loved our son, yet she would not return. I had found her, only to lose her again, And in the silence that followed, I realized the truth. What I had seen tonight would change everything. Not just for me, but for Callan, for Mira, and for the life I thought I understood. I did not sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with my head in my hands, replaying every word Honora had spoken. Her voice echoed in my mind like a song I could not turn off. You shouldn't be here. This isn't your home anymore. Tell Callan I love him. I wanted to believe I had dreamed it, that grief had finally driven me into madness, but the cold truth was that it had happened. I had seen her alive. I had touched the doorknob she stood behind. I had heard her daughter's voice calling her mother. The hours crawled by. I poured myself coffee I never drank. I stared at the scarf of hers that Callan had fallen asleep clutching, wondering if some part of her still lingered there. Every memory of our life together replayed in sharper color now that I knew she was out there breathing, laughing, and living in a world that no longer included me or our son. When the sun rose, Callan padded into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He looked at me, his face pale in the morning light, and asked, "Dad, are you okay?" I forced a smile. "I'm all right, buddy. Just couldn't sleep." He sat at the table across from me, scarf still draped around his shoulders. "I had a dream about Mom again," he said softly. "She told me she loves me." My chest ached, but I managed to nod. "She does love you, Callan." More than anything, he smiled faintly, satisfied with the answer, before turning his attention to the cereal bowl I set in front of him. Watching him eat, so young and yet so weighed down by loss, I made a decision. I would not tell him what I had seen, not yet. How could I burden him with the truth that his mother was alive but unreachable, alive but unwilling to come back to us? That knowledge would not heal him, it would break him. Later that day, Rowan came by. He carried his usual air of certainty, his stride firm, his voice steady. "You look like hell, son," he said, pulling out a chair. "Rough night?" I stared at him for a long moment, wondering if I should confess what had happened. But I knew what he would say. He would tell me I was imagining things, that grief had clouded my mind, or worse, he would believe me and insist on storming that house, dragging Honora back into our lives whether she wanted it or not. Neither outcome would help, so I stayed silent. "Just couldn't sleep," I muttered. Rowan studied me, his eyes narrowing, but he did not press further. He simply patted my shoulder and said, "Keep going, Evan. One step at a time. That's how you survive." That phrase haunted me all day. One step at a time. But how do you take steps when the ground beneath you has shifted completely? How do you live when the woman you mourned, the woman you loved beyond reason, has told you she belongs to a life that excludes you? That night I returned to the park, drawn there as if by a tether. I stood at the bench where I had first found Mira. The wood was damp from the evening dew, the pond rippling under the moonlight. The memory of her small, trembling hand in mine made my chest ache. Somewhere, not far from where I stood, Honora was tucking that little girl into bed, whispering goodnight the way she once whispered it to Callan. I wondered if she thought of us in that moment, if her heart pulled in two directions. I realized then that grief does not end when the person you love dies. Sometimes grief is forced to begin again when you discover they still exist, but are lost to you in another way. And in that painful truth, I found my lesson. I could not keep chasing ghosts, even if they were flesh and blood. I had to live for the son who depended on me. I walked home slowly, carrying that weight inside me. When I opened the door, Callan was on the couch waiting. He looked up at me with those same wide eyes Honora once had, and he asked, "Where did you go?" I smiled softly, kneeling in front of him. "I went for a walk. But I'm here now, and I'll always be here." He nodded, resting his head against my chest. In that moment I knew what mattered most. I could not bring Honora back into our lives, but I could give Callan the one thing he needed most: me, fully present, unbroken, willing to carry him through the storm. The mystery of that night will never leave me. I do not know how Honora survived, why she has chosen a life without us, or what forces gave her that chance. Maybe one day I will understand. But for now, all I can do is keep my promise to my son: to live, to love him fiercely, and to never let him feel abandoned. And if there is one lesson I want you, the listener, to take from my story, it is this: life will tear at you in ways you cannot imagine, but the people who remain in your arms are the ones you must hold on to with everything you have. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it moved you, if it left you with questions, or if it reminded you of the power of love and loss, I ask you to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment about what it made you feel. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything, and it helps me keep sharing these moments that change us forever.